The morning light came slow and pale over the Alaskan interior, spilling gold across a world locked in white. The river below the ridge had frozen solid weeks ago, its groaning ice echoing through the valley like the breath of some ancient creature beneath the earth. Frost clung to every spruce needle and every tuft of grass that dared to rise from the snow. From the edge of a small clearing, smoke drifted lazily from the crooked stovepipe of a log cabin. Inside, a single man stirred, Elias McCord, one of the last trappers still living by the ways his father taught him before the turn of the century. He rose from a narrow bunk lined with fur, his breath hanging in the cold air. The fire in the small iron stove had burned low, just embers now. He fed it a few sticks of birch, the flame licking upward, throwing orange light across the rough-hewn walls. Every object in the cabin had a purpose. The traps hanging from wooden pegs, the flintlock rifle resting across the doorframe, the snowshoes patched and worn from a dozen seasons. Elias moved without wasted motion, the way men did when they'd spent years alone in the wild. His face was lined and windburned, his beard stiff with frost, but his eyes were steady, the clear blue of a man who had seen more winters than most men could endure. Outside, his dogs whined softly in their pen, their breath rising in plumes. 6 of them, lean, strong, and bound to Elias by a bond older than words. He stepped out into the cold, the air biting against his face, the world silent except for the crack of ice and the distant call of a raven. He moved among the dogs, checking harnesses, running his gloved hand along their coats. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice low and even. They wagged their tails, eager but patient. They knew the rhythm of his days as well as he did. It was the winter of 1904, deep in the Yukon frontier, a time when the old trapping routes still wound through the wilderness like veins of memory. The world beyond was changing, railroads, telegraphs, and new towns rising from the snow. But here, far beyond those lines of progress, the wilderness still ruled. Elias had chosen this life long ago, not for gold or glory, but for the quiet, the kind that only existed where man's voice was swallowed by the wind. He spent the morning cutting more wood, stacking it beside the cabin wall, each log a promise of warmth. Then, with care and precision, he began to prepare for the season ahead. He checked his steel traps, relics forged decades ago, their springs still strong despite the rust of years. He oiled his rifle, tested the flint, packed cartridges wrapped in waxed cloth. Every motion was deliberate, learned through repetition and necessity. There were no mistakes allowed here. One broken trap, one spoiled pelt, one misjudged storm, any could mean the difference between life and death. The wilderness demanded everything. Elias respected that. As midday passed, he strapped on his snowshoes and hiked to the river. The snow was knee-deep, powdery, and silent. Beneath him, the ice groaned and cracked in slow, deep notes. He crouched near the bank, brushing frost from a hole he had cut days earlier. The water below ran black and cold, like a secret beneath the land. From a small tin box, he drew his fishing line, sinew wrapped around a stick, and lowered the bait. Hours passed. The world moved only in the whisper of wind across the pines and the distant echo of a wolf's howl. Finally, a tug. Elias pulled the line, hand over hand, until a flash of silver broke through the hole, an Arctic grayling, sleek and alive even in this frozen world. He murmured a quiet thanks and slipped it into his pack. In the wilderness, every catch was a victory, and every meal earned. By late afternoon, the horizon darkened with clouds the color of iron. The wind began to rise, sweeping snow through the trees. Elias felt it, a change in pressure, a taste in the air that only men of the old ways could read. A storm was coming. He turned back toward his cabin, his dogs sensing it too, pacing restlessly as the first flakes began to fall. Inside, the world shrank to the glow of the fire and the smell of burning pine. Elias hung his coat by the stove, brushed snow from his beard, and set the fish to roast on a pan blackened from years of use. He ate slowly, in silence, listening to the wind build outside. The storm hit in full by nightfall, the kind that erased sound, sight, and direction. Snow slammed against the cabin walls. The dogs whined, restless, while the roof groaned under the weight. Elias fed the fire higher, his shadow flickering against the log walls. He was trapped now, but this was nothing new. He had weathered storms that lasted for days. He knew how to ration his wood, how to melt snow for water, how to patch the cracks that leaked cold into his bones. Still, each storm reminded him of how small a man truly was in this land. The wilderness didn't hate or forgive, it simply existed, vast and indifferent. Through the night, he kept busy. He mended a torn boot with sinew thread, reshaped a broken snowshoe frame, and checked his traps for signs of rust. The blizzard outside howled like a living thing. He paused now and then, listening, not in fear, but in respect. Somewhere in the roar of the wind, he could almost hear his father's voice, rough, patient, teaching him how to read the land. "The wild gives what you earn," his father had said. But it takes what you forget. By dawn, the storm had eased, leaving the world buried beneath new snow. Elias opened the door and stepped out into silence. The land was transformed, the forest bowed under white weight, the river invisible beneath drifts. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. He looked around, his face calm, his eyes scanning the horizon. For men like him, beauty and danger were the same thing. He knew the coming weeks would test him. The trapline stretched miles through terrain that could kill a careless man in hours. Food would be scarce, and the cold would sharpen until it bit through fur and bone alike. But Elias had no illusions. This was his life, the old way, fading even as he lived it. He turned back toward his cabin, smoke rising once more into the pale sky. As the day closed, he sat by the window, watching snow drift like ghosts through the trees. He took out a small wooden pipe, carved years ago, and lit it with a coal from the fire. The smoke curled upward, blending with the light from the flames. He thought of the men he had known, trappers who'd left for towns, mines, or graves, and wondered if anyone would come after him. Outside, the wilderness stretched endless and unbroken, the silence vast enough to swallow memory itself. Inside, the fire cracked softly, a small defiance against the cold. Elias leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the wind's low song as it swept across the frozen land. He had survived another storm. But in his heart, he knew, the hardest part of the season was still to come. And beyond the mountains, another storm was already rising.